But let's shift to a question about...
I think that's right. Okay. Just the last point on that before your question.
For sure.
I think that listen and learn, you've hit on that a couple times, and I think it's a really important point, is listen and learn more than you judge. Like try to do that more than you judge, because your first natural reaction is how do I feel about this and make a judgment.
Totally.
But try to switch that amount.
First of all, I adopted the belief early on that I'm not that special. I don't mean that from a low self-esteem place. I mean it from a high self-esteem place.
Hey there, I am super excited to bring to you on my Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast a new success interview. It was my privilege to interview Jason Harris.
You already know. My passion and my mission to help you unleash your greatness within. My heart goes out to the underdogs that's on their way. If you think you can go from good to great, okay, let's motivate. GreatnessWithin.com. DJ Hoisington. GreatnessWithin.com.
You see, Jason is the president and CEO of the award-winning creative agency Mechanism. He has also written a national bestseller titled The Soulful Art of Persuasion. And boy, do we need more soulful persuasion. We'll explain that in the interview. But you know, his company, his agency, Mechanism, has been named several times one of the best places to work. He's landed on many other charts and lists and received many awards for the work that he's done, where he combines soul and science to create provocative campaigns that engage audiences. And let me tell you something, in this interview, we talk about universal principles that can elevate not only your business and your brand, but also your life. So this is gonna really be awesome. So if you're watching this on YouTube, hey, do me a favor, just as a quick reminder, subscribe to my YouTube channel and make sure that you click that notification bell so that you're the first to receive any notifications when we come out with a new success interview like this or other success or motivational message. So without any further ado, you're gonna love this interview. It was great to have Jason on the show. Just a cool guy with some awesome thoughts and insights. So let's just jump right into the interview.
Jason, welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
Thanks for having me, TJ. Stoked to be here.
I'm stoked to have you on the show. I've been reading your book. I've been studying your work a little bit, and boy, do you have some great stuff to share. So why don't we just start off, which is something we do with all of our guests. Would you give us a little bit of your backstory?
Yeah, sure. So I currently run an advertising agency. We've got offices in 4 cities, independent company. I started that with some friends about 2006-ish. So been doing that for, a while. And I always knew as a kid, I grew up in Virginia. My parents were teachers. They were academics, did a lot of reading in the house. I sort of rebelled against them a little bit. I became a bit of a TV addict. So I'd watch a ton of TV. I know that's not good for you. But as a 12 or 13-year-old, I would look at the little stories in between the shows I was watching, which are the ads.
Yeah.
Mikey Likes It, Lego My Ego, The Kool-Aid Man. That was when I was growing up. And I realized someone makes a living doing that. And I thought maybe I could create a career doing that. So ever since I got out of college, I really studied. I worked at different advertising agencies and studied cultures I liked, what I learned from my mentors, and I always knew I would start my own thing. I always had that entrepreneurial spirit deep inside. And the way I went about it was just, part of writing your own story, which I know you talk a lot about, is the first step is knowing where you want to go. Yep. You can't do much until you crack that code. And I was very fortunate that at a young age, I knew where I wanted to go. And then I just had to learn from other people what I wanted to take and what I wanted to leave behind so I could educate myself and create my own thing. And, other people do it different ways. Sometimes they just start their own thing right away and learn from trial and error. My approach was a little more methodical, where I wanted to, I journal a lot, kept a lot of notes about different things I liked, different things I heard, different ways bosses made me feel, the way work came out, the way the creative process worked through collaborative effort or individual effort, and really created a company. And when we started the company, we had a list of beliefs and values, and we rolled those out. We have them printed in all of our books still. Whenever a new employee starts, we walk them through those values. And that's just really important. And that's really how it all started. And the reason for the book, The Soulful Art of Persuasion, came out of building a business in the cutthroat, line of work, which is advertising, very competitive. What skills did I learn over that time that made me successful in business? And could I extrapolate that into a system that I could then share with the world? And that was really the idea behind the book. And it took me 3 years to create that book. Yeah, it was a long process because, when you're doing that plus running a company or whatever job, it's really hard.
Oh boy, do I know that. I mean,
Sure.
technically I should have been coming out with a book since 2005. I probably should have been coming out with a book every 2 years or so, but running a business and consulting and so forth, I'm with you, dude. Your plate is full, right?
Your plate's full. Yeah. And so, so it took me about 3 years, and then I came out with it, and I'm just, maybe there's another one down the road, but right now this is sort of the message I'm really, I feel really convicted that people can learn from this book how to persuade and sell and create personal relationships and business relationships. And it's a lot of what I learned packed into that book, so other people can, hopefully take that experience and find success with it.
Well, let me tell you something. I've read the book, The Soulful Art of Persuasion. And let me tell you something. I kept writing and underlining things, and I just kept saying, yep, core principle, universal principle. You got to apply it, kind of a thing. And
I love that.
No. It was well written. You got a lot of great stories in there too. You've got your spin on it, your coolness. It's I think it was well done, but it still took me back to fundamental principles of relationships and so forth. And we'll get into some of those, but do me a favor. How would you define, and it doesn't have to be a definition, but the word soulful? I love the word soul and soulful. So any thoughts around why you use that word?
Yeah, for me, soulful persuasion or soulful business or soulful branding, however you want to call it. For you, it could be soulful speaking. It's really all about, having a set of beliefs and trying to inspire other people. It's really about doing that inspiration. And by being soulful and being inspiring, you're doing something for the world that's bigger than yourself. You're doing something that's, it's not just about like making more money, building a business. It's not about me. It's like, what can I do for the world that's bigger than me? That to me is what soul's all about. It's looking outside yourself.
I love that. I often share in my programs this quote by Kurt Kelleher, who is the founder of Southwest Airlines. And he said this quote, "Leading an organization is as much about soul as it is about systems." And I felt like when I was reading your book, that's it.
Yeah.
It's getting the heart involved in what you're doing. Yeah. I wrote down a couple key words underneath that quote when I thought of the word soul: authenticity, relationships, shared values, and shared passions. Yeah. And I felt a lot of that as I read your book.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think we share a lot of those same beliefs for sure. I was watching some of your stuff before, and I think we sort of have a very similar,
I think so,
sort of zeitgeist. Yours is sort of the art of achievement, and mine's sort of the art of persuasion, which leads to achievement, but it's kind of very similar.
Which you say here in the book, which I think is right on. You say here, I'm not sure exactly what page it is. It's toward the beginning. You say, quote, "Persuasion." The word persuasion isn't exactly a heartwarming word. It is kind of a loaded, and most people associate it with deception or some form of coercion. and you talk about rhetoric and so forth and the political attack ads and so forth, and it sort of gets a bad rap. But persuasion, you say, can also come from a positive, life-affirming place, hyphen, a soulful place.
Definitely.
Wow, powerful.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, I think the way I view persuasion is that, we're doing it, all of us are doing it all day long,
Yeah, for
whether
sure.
we realize it or not. You're persuading, your significant other to go on this trip. You're persuading, maybe if you have kids, I know you have 4 kids.
Oh,
You're
you have done your
persuading,
research.
you're persuading them to, like,
Totally.
be motivated or
Yeah.
achieve some goal that you want them to achieve. And if you work for someone, you're persuading your boss to give you a promotion or move you to a different area. Whatever it is, we're in this dance of micro persuasions all day long.
Mhm.
And the way we do that is really through emotional feelings and how we make people feel and how we can convey our thoughts and tell stories and put that out there. And it's really important that we are good at persuasion. And persuasion can come down, it's a little binary. It can be like positive or it can be negative,
Right.
and it's really one or the other. And I opt obviously for positive persuasion to get people to your side and have them understand the way you're thinking and not go the negative route, because the world has so much negativity as it is,
It sure does.
especially now if you don't believe what the other side believes in, you just hate each other, versus understanding what's behind it or finding the common ground or realizing the humanity in all of us. It's really, I've never seen a country so divided like it is now.
On the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast, I have had people on that I fully did not agree with, but let me tell you something, you would never know that.
Right. Yeah.
Because what I try to do, even with guests that are a little bit more maybe on the fringe of certain philosophies and so forth from where I stand,
Yeah.
it doesn't make me right or wrong, doesn't make them right or wrong. We should be able to hear each other out. And I think we've lost some of that it's okay for me to disagree. And I don't do this on the show really much, but it should be okay that we can disagree with each other without hating each other, without attacking each other.
Yeah. Yeah. You can have different viewpoints and find common ground and realize that, something I always throw out is that we're all 99.9% the same DNA. That shows you right there. We're so similar. There's 0.1% that makes us all different, but we feel like it's flipped. We feel like we're all 99% different from everyone else. And we all want the same things out of life. We really do. And we just might have different views, and that's fine. That's what America was always founded on, is freedom of speech. You can have your own views. You can have your own religious values and teachings. And it seems like somehow that's sort of been it started really with politics, but it's sort of been slowly stripped away, I think.
Yeah, and I think your book,
really sad.
The Soulful Art of Persuasion, brings it back to the core. And I kept thinking as I was reading it, I was thinking, that's if the other side, if you will, just using that as a term, will listen to you.
Yeah.
Right? Because you talk about character. I love these words that you use in the book. I wrote them down. The word character, the word disposition, the motto of Mechanism, which is your company. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I wrote this down, so I read it somewhere. The motto of Mechanism, your company, is to assume genius.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
So, yeah, you said that right. So this is a working approach for an advertising agency that I think you can apply to whatever career you're in. But assume genius in my business, which is not a very trustworthy business. There's a Gallup poll I talk about in the book where the least trustworthy professions in the world, there's a congressperson or congressman, used car salesperson, and then advertising practitioner.
Wow.
So of the least trustworthy professions, we're in the top 3. So no one trusts what we do, which is depressing in and of itself, but I don't really want to share the the podium of distrust with those other,
Love it.
you know, professions. And I don't really find it's true. But in order to work with clients, and a lot of places, when I talked earlier about gathering vibes and you know, feelings and beliefs from other places I worked at some places where they would work with the client and just assume the client was a bonehead, and they had to figure out how to sell an idea to a client however they could, you know, like beg, borrow, and steal to get this idea sold through, because we have to save the client from themselves. And you can apply that to other professions. And so we go through this idea of assumed genius, which is we assume the clients we work with are as smart or smarter than we are.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go in with that proposition for any business, you're going to have a lot more success than trying to, you know, pull one over on someone, or, you know, go away and not collaborate and come back with the answer because you think that they're not smart enough to be along for the journey.
Love it.
And so it's just I've worked at places like that where, you know, they just would, you know, talk behind the client's back. They'd create this like toxic environment. You know, you'd hang up the phone and then all the chatter would start. And I just always hated that feeling. It created this like us versus them mentality. When you're working with any client, it should be a shared collaboration. And so assume genius, really, for me, you can apply that to any business, but it's assume that the client that's paying you is as smart or smarter than you, and go from that starting point. Yeah.
No, that's really good. And how do you do that when it's so volatile right now? Have you had any thoughts over the last few months and going into the next couple months in terms of when you see the news and you see people sitting at, let's say, a restaurant peacefully eating, and then people coming in and shouting at them? Those are the extreme. I get it. That is the fringe. But what's the soulful art of persuasion in a context like that? Have you had any thoughts around that?
Yeah. Like in the world we're living in now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just infinitely, same principles apply. It's just infinitely harder because the world is on edge, and people are, you know, angrier than normal and can get set off at any moment because there's this, you know, pent up anxiety that people have. So I think it's just more important than ever to be sort of empathetic and try to, which is one of the principles in the book.
It is. Yep.
is try to be empathetic and try to, as much as you can, see those commonalities and not the differences, and seek that common ground with whoever you approach. You know, that doesn't mean you roll over and when someone's being an a-hole,
right,
you know,
right.
you sit there and you try to find a common ground. Like, you know, you have to be human.
Right.
And when someone's an a-hole, you gotta be like, hey, you're an a-hole.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And not waste your time with that person. But the by and large is about finding those commonalities and not the differences. But, you know, it's hard. It's ever more challenging. I'm in New York. You know, New York was like, well, like Seattle, you know, it was like, when it started, it was just brutal, you know, people have just so hard. And, you know, we've come out the other side. Schools are starting next week. You know, we came out the other side of it so far, but it's just, you know, you see the city has been damaged. You know, you just see people's psyche is just not the same. You know, they're on edge.
Well, it's tough. And then they want to raise the taxes on people that make over a certain amount of money for the damages that were caused in Seattle. And you think, well, many of those people weren't even a part of that whole situation there in the city of Chaz, if you will. And so, listen, it's not to say that there aren't injustices that need to be fixed. Correct. It's not saying that there isn't the biggest room in the world, I've said it for years, is the room for improvement. So granted,
I love that.
Yeah, there's room to grow. There's room for us to be better. There's room for me to go, let me look at my world differently and see if there's a better way to do whatever. But like any relationship, think of a marriage. It's not I wrote down here somewhere right now, there's a spirit of it's my way or the highway. But you know this, soulful persuasion is not my way or the highway. Of every client that you've worked with, for example, and I'm assuming it'd be the same with every client I've worked with inside companies. By and large, we're working with some pretty nice people, kind people that maybe there's some storm before the norm in terms of the strategy that we use or the strategies we're going to put in place or this or that. But there's always a place in a boardroom, in my case, where although we can have strong discussions, we listen to each other and we're willing to adjust where it makes sense to adjust without pigeonholing ourselves into a particular place that doesn't serve the greater whole. And when I think of soul, I think of community, right? I think of how does this affect everybody right here? Not just one part. Anyway.
No, I think you're totally right. And I think the my way or the highway, that's like a lot of old ways of doing business, and I think that's old ways of leading. And I think there's generations where you're brought up as a strong leader, is decisive and has strong conviction and doesn't need to consult others. And I think that's just, that's just old school thinking. Like it's our way, that's the, when you think about my way or the highway, it has to be our way is how you move forward. And that means sometimes it means you have to bend a little and they have to bend a little. So you kind of get where you need to go, but that's a real philosophical question about charging, people that live in a certain area for what has happened in that area. And, we could talk for hours about like, taking, giving wealth in different areas, and is it useful, and does the government know how to take the money and spend it wisely?
Yeah.
I don't, it's in some cases, yes. In a lot of cases, no. And,
I come from a place, Jason, I came from nothing. Well, let me be real clear. I came from a family who loved me. So I did have that, which a lot of people don't have. I get that. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the reality. But in my case, I had that. But financially, it was tight. We had a big family, 8 kids, and so forth. So when I locked on the idea, like you, as a teenager, that I would be doing what I'm doing today, just like you're doing what you're doing today, you landed on that idea as a younger person.
Yeah.
It didn't take me long to realize that if it's to be, it's up to me. I can't blame my circumstances. I can't blame my parents. That I have to go create my own reality. And I've spent 23 years doing just that. And the whole message of greatness within, or soulful persuasion, right, is all about equipping yourself with those tools, which you provide in the book, tools for leveraging yourself in a positive way, and not in a have to way, but in a want to way.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And I think this idea, which, sort of came to me later in life, because, I was successful in my career.
For sure.
And I was like, okay, this is it. So like, I guess I build a business, I make money, and that's it. That's my thing.
Yeah. Right.
Like, that's it. Like, that's not enough, that's not enough. I
agree.
And it shouldn't be enough for anyone. Like, and so whatever level you are, or success, entrepreneur, working at a company, not struggling to find your careers, pivoting careers, this idea of being soulful and inspiring to others and doing more than, looking outside yourself, that will create success. That will make you successful because of your mindset. That will make you successful because you're thinking on a much broader perspective than,
that's right.
How do I increase my paycheck? Which will increase your paycheck.
That's right.
But you have to like shift the way of your thinking. Like thinking about just monetary gain is limiting. It's small thinking. It's just small thinking.
I call that scarcity thinking versus
Yeah.
abundance thinking. Abundance thinking causes you to collaborate with others. It causes you to look beyond yourself.
Yeah.
I have this thought.
I like that abundance thinking. Yeah. What's your thought?
And I'm being a little bit personal here. I have a brother who went down a dark path starting in middle school, late middle school or something, and got into drugs and so forth. And for many years, the family just sort of despised him. Not that we were...
He was older or younger?
He was younger than me.
Okay.
But for 15 years, just the problems he was causing, anybody that's had to deal with a family member who's dealt with alcoholism or drugs or whatever can probably relate to a little bit of this. It's just really hard to deal with it. And I remember his world crashed and his children were taken away from him and blah, blah, blah. A lot to go in there. But I remember about 3 months later, he asked if he can come by the house. In the past, I sort of was like, no, we'll find a place to meet because it was volatile, right? But he sounded good on the phone. So I asked him to come over and, or he asked to come over and we had a nice visit. And I thought, wow, this is not the same brother that I knew a few months ago. What has changed? And I could literally notice a physical change which stemmed from his mindset and his spirit. I don't know if any of that makes sense. His countenance had changed.
Yeah, right, sure.
I said, what's changed? He goes, I finally woke up and I've been going to 2 AA meetings every day for the last 3 months. And I said, wow. So we had this great conversation for a couple hours, totally sane, totally straight. He says, I've been clean for 3 months. He left. But he told me about the AA book, the original 1935 book that he had been reading and they referred to in the class and so forth. And I thought, well, this is almost miraculous. I said, so when he left, I ordered the book and I read the AA book. And I don't drink any alcohol. I never
Is
have.
that like the
12-step book. It's the original 12-step book.
Okay.
It's called the big book, I think is what it's actually titled. And I read it. And the whole opening portion of that book was all about you need to have a higher purpose in your life.
Oh, wow.
And he gives the example of how all these people who were alcoholics would go to the famous psychologists to help them overcome their alcoholism and so forth. And he says none of them worked. He said the only people that lasted free of alcohol over a year were those people that had a higher purpose, a higher deity. And he doesn't say who that deity needs to be, but he says a higher purpose in your life. And I just think that was the difference. My brother decided he had more meaning in life than this lifestyle over here. And he's been now clean for a year and a half. And I just think that's kind of your message, is finding that bigger purpose in your life. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful. Are you still on edge with him, or do you feel like
no? He texts me all the time now. We communicate.
Awesome.
We communicate normally without him going into an anger burst or whatever else. And why? Because first of all, he cleaned his body up.
Yep.
And he put his life in order. And he started to take responsibility in a culture right now of a lack of responsibility. He decided he was in charge of his own greatness within, if you will. And once he adopted that, and where did it come from? It came from 2 places. The book, yes, was an eye-opener for him, and it was for me too, because I started to see a pattern. But also those meetings of being around like-minded people. And when you think of your company or my company, or it's just there's power in being around the right people.
That's true. That's very true. And well, that's a powerful story. I'm really glad for your brother that he found that, and I think AA works, I think it does. People that I know have gone, it works. It definitely does.
Yeah, it can.
I think that higher purpose is part of it, where, I think he realizes he's not just living for himself, right? He's living for others. That's like a big twit. That's a big like mental change when you think others are counting on you and you're trying to inspire other people. You know, again, it goes back to looking outside of yourself. And so, you know, for me, the other big eye opener from the book is like this principle 1, which sounds like, you know, some of the stuff that you'd read in the book, but this idea of being original it always goes back to me from the, you know, it's the Oscar Wilde quote of "Be yourself, everyone else is already taken."
Yes.
It's that idea of like, know who you are, know your beliefs, find your role models, you know, study what you like about your role models, reach out to your role models, you know, understand storytelling and what the impact of those stories are to connect with other people. And the fundamental part of that also is this idea of to being true to yourself, not being transactional, not thinking just about money, but think about to be yourself. You're creating relationships with others, you're building relationships, and you're playing the long game with those relationships. You're not trying to, and so other places that I had worked, you know, there's a lot of like, close a deal, close a deal, close a deal. It was that Glenn Ross, like, just make the deal at all costs, make the money, hit the quarter goal, hit the annual goal, and keep progressing that way. And that's really short-term thinking. That transactional thinking will be okay for a bit, and then it runs out of gas.
Temporary. Yeah.
It's temporary. It's fleeting. And that never be closing idea of building relationships and getting rid of that short-term transactional thinking is super powerful. And that's being true to yourself and not trying to sell under some other guise or some other cloak or something you don't believe in. You know, never sell something you don't believe in.
I coach executives, and one thing I'll hear in the voice of some executives, there's this perfectionism that has drove them to be successful, but they've used that perfectionism to prove themselves to everybody else. And I can hear it in their voice. They're constantly trying to prove themselves that they measure up to everybody else. And I'll often find myself say, stop trying to be and just be.
Yeah, I like that.
Right? And you even say in your book, I wrote it down here, you're talking about being original. You say treat people's idiosyncrasies as questions. So that's one thought, rather than define people by the weirdness or the twerks.
Yeah.
You actually said, I heard you say, quote, lean into your twerks. Explain that.
Yeah, I think it's just whatever things you try to like sweep under the rug and hide from people, you know, that you're embarrassed about.
Yeah.
It could be books, shows, things you collect, you know, the things that make you. Lean into those and create stories around them. You know, don't try to do when you're selling or you have a client, don't try to do mirror and matching where you're like, oh, you play golf? Oh, I love golf, you know, but really you don't love golf at all.
Yep.
Oh, you like golf? I love ultimate Frisbee, and here's why. You know, really be true to yourself, because that will come through in your conviction, the way you talk.
Yeah.
And, you know, the thing you said earlier is like one of my biggest pet peeves is when people repeat someone's name over and over, or they have, every time you talk to them, they're like, oh, you know, I got this award and that award, and I won this thing, and I've been you know, doing this for X amount of years, and I know this famous person and that famous person. That to me is like a real sign of lack of confidence in themselves, lack of understanding. This idea of always proving yourself, people see right through that very quickly, you know. And I think when you don't need to prove yourself, it's because you're stable and, you know, you're convicted in your beliefs, and people gravitate towards that, I think.
I totally agree. And so the antidote for me, when the word that came to my mind, and tell me what you think about it, is rather than make the focus about you when you around other people, turn the table the other side. A great conversationalist is someone that will ask questions 20% of the time and listen 80% of the time.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
People usually, a lot of times, have that switch because of their own insecurities and so forth. So the antidote, in my mind, would be curious.
Be curious. I love that. Yeah. Yeah.
Just if someone brings something up that you're unfamiliar with, or like you said, you don't have any interest in golfing, for example. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe you love Frisbees or whatever.
Yeah.
If you don't know anything about golf, isn't it a beautiful thing to say, help me understand golf? What got you into golf?
I love that. Yeah. What do you love about it? Like, why do you spend 9 hours on a Saturday doing it? Like, what is it about it that you love? How does it, and then you get them to open up.
Totally.
And then you're building a connection with them because they're opening up to you. And then you do the same. You know, you might want to start by opening up something that you love and why you love it.
Exactly.
And it's not the same thing. It's just about, we each have a passion, and here's why we have a passion, and you get to know each other that way.
And if you can say to someone, this true sign of confidence is this term right here, or this phrase, you know what? I don't know. Or I don't know anything about golf. Help me understand. I want to understand. And then that might connect to something else. I just really believe, and I think the spirit of it is in your book, be more curious about people. Ask more questions. Yeah. Take the focus off yourself and take the focus on building them, listening to them, finding out what their needs are, and you'll go a long way. And that's the beginning of building a relationship, right?
And it's also showing a sign of respect, you know, the curiosity about other people. There's a lot of respect there. And, you know, when you may meet people, and, you know, I was on I did a Zoom recently with my girlfriend, who was introducing me to one of her friends. It's not really that important, but we got off the Zoom, and she was like, well, what'd you think? And I was like, well, you know, I wasn't that impressed because they asked me 0 questions about me.
Yeah.
And they talked the entire time. And to me, that's a sign of a lack of interest, lack of respect, lack of curiosity. And I think that leaves people with a really bad taste.
Totally.
You know?
All right. You talk about the principle. Well, I don't know. I wrote it here. Anyway, the principle of charity, which is see others in the best light.
Yeah. So, you know, the first principle we talked about was original. Second principle is this idea of generous. And generous, to me, there's 4 main principles in the book.
Yep.
The second principle of generous is this idea of, you know, practicing positivity is one big way to be generous. And I know it's a little kumbaya, you know, this idea of gratitude, but cultivating your sense of gratitude, for me, is really important practice that took me a long time to learn.
Why do we take that step back and say it's a little kumbaya? And I do hear people do that. Listen, that is the meat.
Yeah.
Right? Soft skills are really the hard skills.
That's true. I mean, it was, and some of these principles in the book, you might naturally be yourself, you know?
Yeah.
You might naturally be empathetic. For me, I was not naturally a generous person. I was not naturally I wasn't, you know, this idea of giving something away at every interaction. You know, when you cross paths with someone, try to make them better off than before they cross paths with you. And this idea of being positive and being grateful, that was a learned skill for me. You know, I was always, maybe like a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people you coach, I mean, I think you should stay frosty and hardworking, but I was never grateful or content. I was always like, what's next?
Yeah.
I haven't done enough. I haven't made it there. And when you lose that perspective of the present life you have, mm-hmm. and what's around you and the people that are around you, and how to be generous with your time and with the people around you, because you're like on this solo climb to get to the next level. And I think that took me a while to really learn that, which is a principle to me of like being generous with other people, making them feel like they when they interacted with you, they came away better than they were before they interacted with you. And that really takes like conscious focus and practice. And yeah, that's a skill I really had to focus on and learn.
Go ahead. No, keep going.
Which you can do, like all these skills, you can develop them with like anything, with like a muscle, like a sport.
That's right.
You know, you practice it, you're going to develop it, and then it'll be in your subconscious once you develop that skill. But you have to like work hard at it.
That's right. It's not like you're either born with it or you're not born with it. They used to think you're either born with talent, and that's the key to success back 40 years ago. But enough research has come out since then to say, no, it's not about talent. It's about discipline. It's about hard work. It's about, just buying into a vision that drives you. That will make the difference. And I think a lot of that, what you just explained, has to do with humility. You had to come to a place where you had to humble yourself just a little bit to realize I could be better. Now, I'm also one to think that you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater either. I mean, that focus that you had early on to get to the next level is what drove you to where you are at today. But you're able to look back now and go, hey, maybe there's a balance in it that I can apply a little bit differently. Is that fair?
Exactly. Yeah, that's totally fair. And I think that balance can benefit others around you in your day-to-day life, No,
totally. Yeah. So you've got original, you've got soulful. We've talked about that. You've talked about generous of the four, and you've talked about being empathetic. And being empathetic means you got to listen to people, and it doesn't mean you have to agree with them. But let's shift to a question.
I think that's right. Okay. Just the last point on that before your question is,
sure.
I think that listen and learn, you've hit on that a couple times, and I think it's a really important point, is listen and learn more than you judge. Like try to do that more than you judge, because your first natural reaction is how do I feel about this, and make a judgment.
Totally.
But try to switch that amount.
First of all, I adopted the belief early on that I'm not that special. I don't mean that from a low self-esteem place. I mean it from a high self-esteem place.
Right.
Which is, I'm not that special that it's my way or the highway, right? So I want to listen to you, Jason. I want to listen to what you've learned along your path. Think about all the pebbles you've learned. Right? There's things I can learn from that. And so I think that's just really powerful to just in a conversation, keep the focus on them. Is my main.
I love that. Yeah.
Thing. All right. So shift to leadership and how you've grown your company. I had this thought. Mechanism, your company, was named to Ad Age's agency, A-List, and twice to their best places to work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like one of my favorite awards, is the best places to work.
Is it? Okay, so the question is, talking about culture, company culture, what have you done with your company to create and by the way, there was it looks like another list here that you landed on, Creativity's Creative 50 list. Is that what that is?
Yeah, that's that. Yeah.
Okay. So what did you do as to kind of create a culture where people wanted to work and do it in a soulful way? Are there any specific patterns in terms of leadership?
I think if you depending on what kind of company you have, if you're on an executive team, leadership team, if you have partners, if it's your own company, the idea of writing down that set of beliefs is really what unlocked it. That kind of unleashed our greatness, is as having a set of beliefs and criteria written down, explained. We go over it twice a year in our annual meetings. Every employee gets to hear about it. But it's this idea of, we're creative entrepreneurs, everyone in the company. We work with optimism. We try to work with fearlessness. Mm-hmm. We try to work in realistic expectations. We are collaborative. We put ego and politics outside the workplace. We don't bring it into the workplace. We try to create a fairly flat company. So just having some of those beliefs and then articulating them, repeating them over and over and over to the company, that's what makes the biggest impact in culture. Because it's like we talked about practicing earlier. When you're repeating that over and over, people understand it and they learn it and it becomes subconscious and it just becomes the way you operate. But you have to write that down. You can't expect people to guess what they are, or a new person comes on with their own set of beliefs from another company,
Yep.
And they're going to like do it their way. Well, that has to fit in the way. And if they don't belong there, if they can't fit into the way the culture is at my company. And so, putting pen to paper, writing them down, repeating them, that's made like all the difference. But we have these journals where they're like printed in the front of the journal and everyone uses those journals at work. We do it for our creds deck. They're in the front of our creds deck. We have videos that we play that have these values. And so it's really marketing the values like we would market any brand or company or anything else. And it's just different ways to let them seep inside, the consciousness.
That's huge. And that's really good for any leader listening to this. That is really critical. Okay, let's wind down. In your book, you talk about character. And this is what you say in the book, and I'll read it. The most powerful kind of persuasiveness is one that flows from a well-formed character. When you've worked to develop certain personal traits and skills, people will take notice. Some of the habits and dispositions I've discussed, including respectfulness, positivity, and generosity, mostly pertain to your interactions with other people. But your character isn't just revealed in the ways you negotiate the social world. It also is evidence in your approach to work and your interests. What say you about character? Because I think character is huge.
I think character is kind of the crucial link to everything. And character, that summary is what I think of character is. It's about your view on the world and how others see you and how you interact with others. And it's critical to get that straight. It's critical to get it on straight. And
do you bring people, do you bring people into your company and try to identify some of those core principles as you're hiring them? Or
we do it. We do it through the interview process, and then we do it through our reviews. Our annual reviews are based on our core philosophies, and if people live those philosophies, and that's really how they get, success and promoted, and do they embody those feelings? So it's even woven all the way through to what they get kind of graded on.
That's great. It sounds like you have created a strong culture at your agency, and it was great to have you on the call. And I think all these principles are just powerful. The Soulful Art of Persuasion is the book. Get it. I do think that the principles you've talked about in the book, Jason, are evergreen. They are core principles to life. And listen, if you want to be successful, you reap what you sow. And so if you want to reap negativity, then keep being negative. But if you want to reap positive and forward thinking and energetic ideas, you got to be, as you mentioned here, on character, respectful, positive, and generous. I love it.
Definitely. Well, I'm going to also, I have one more thought for you.
Yes, please.
Which is that I do a Connected Friday, because it's hard to keep culture in a, several 100-person company during everyone being at home. Because culture really, a lot of it happens when you meet with a lot of leaders in your leadership consulting practice. Mm-hmm. And a lot of culture is that collaborative, what happens at work.
Yes.
It's sort of an intangible thing. It's harder to do over video, right? With everyone dispersed. But I do Connected Friday meeting where I, address the entire company every week. And I always end with a quote. And I'm going to jack the quote from the video of you I watched, which is so powerful, which is that George Lucas quote.
Oh, my favorite.
Which is, we are all living in cages with the doors wide open.
That's it.
That to me, and I'd never heard that quote before, that is such a big unlock to me of how to view the world. It's really mind blowing.
Totally. We are all living in cages with the doors wide open. Doesn't that just move you emotionally?
No, yeah.
Like, dude,
it really does. It really does. It shows you that anything's possible if you've got if you know what you want, and then you've got the right attitude. Anything's possible.
And you realize you have all the gifts you need right now. Not that you don't have to develop some skills. Yes, you've got to do that. But I remember when I was writing my first book in the backseat of my car, parked outside of a grocery store parking lot to get away from the basement of my parents' house that my family was living in at the time, almost lost everything financially. And I wrote, If You Think You Can, in 2 months. And 2 months later, it became an international bestseller. All of a sudden, my speaking fees went from a couple $100 a speaking gig at the time to, let's just say, a multiplied amount. Let's just leave it at that, right?
All right.
And I thought, I'm no different than the guy that was sitting in the back seat of my car just a few months ago. Dude, we're all living in cages with the doors wide open. But unless you're willing, this is TJ thing. Okay, now you got me on my little.
Yeah, no, I like it. It got me fired up.
Unless you are willing to step out into the unknown, risk failure, risk not being approved of, risk someone laughing at you, but then stay focused on it because your vision is so strong. You're like, just believe in that vision. Eventually that magic carpet, I believe, will appear. And you'll realize the whole time, I'm the same person. It was just a matter of unlocking that part of me. That's why I love in the beginning that we talked about is treat people's idiosyncrasies as questions and you said, lean into your twerks. I love that's part about unleashing your greatness within.
That's right. I mean, that is kind of everything to me is leaning in, like amplifying what you believe in. And, first of all, identify what it is and then amplify it and let it go. Don't hold it back. Don't cage it.
Amen.
Let it fly,
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Tell me this. How can people get your book? How can they find out about your company? Give us the lowdown.
Yeah. So company, mechanism.com. It's with a K, MEKANISM.
We'll put a link. We'll put a link up there. No problem.
Right on. Soulfulart.com. More about the book. And then, best way to get it's always on Amazon in these days.
I know, right?
I don't know if you can find an open Barnes & Noble, go for it. But, yeah.
Dude, you're a cool guy. I'm glad to
Thanks,
have had you on the show. Thanks for being a guest. You were great.
Likewise. It was awesome. Great to connect.